Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, and welcome to Medium in Our Midst here on Blog Talk Radio. Today is Wednesday, March 30th. I'm your host, Daria Justin, and tonight we will be talking about one of my very favorite subjects, past lives. And to help facilitate that is my special guest this evening is Rebecca Shaw. Rebecca is the owner and director of the Charleston Hypnosis Center of South Carolina, and she has certifications in clinical hypnotherapy, past life regression therapy, and guided imagery therapy. She is a member of the International Association of Regression Research and Therapies, the National Guild of Hypnotists, that's a tongue twister, and the International Hypnosis Federation. Rebecca is an expert in assisting others in the conscious pursuit of personal growth. She inspires her clients to tap into their own inner strength and wisdom and make changes in order to find more peace and more purpose in their lives. Her practice is in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, but the great news is you don't have to be there in person to experience a past life regression or any of her services. So, having said that, I would like to say good evening, Rebecca, and welcome to Medium in Our Midst.
Good evening, and thank you for having me, Daria. I'm really honored to be on your show.
Oh, I am so happy to have you here. This is such an exciting subject for me, as you can imagine. And so let's begin by talking a little bit about your practice and about what led you to hypnosis.
Okay. Well, let's see. I've been doing this work for about 17 years, and I started studying it just sort of as a hobby when I was out in Southern California. But even before that, I went to the University of Virginia, and at the time that I was there, the head of the Department of Psychiatry was Ian Stevenson, and he is, some people may have even read some of his books on past life regression, but he made it his life's mission to go out there and actually clinically do research to prove reincarnation. And when I heard him speak, he was so passionate and so convincing. I think that planted the seed in the back of my mind, and that just sort of lay dormant until I went to Southern California and started taking classes in self-hypnosis. And when I was training in clinical hypnotherapy, my instructor wanted to really give a broad background to us. And so one of the things that we actually did in our initial trainings was doing some past life regression. And it was really fascinating to me. Even at that time, for myself, I wasn't sure what I believed, but the information that came up for me was really powerful, and so I was hooked at that point.
So it's interesting that past life regression actually brought you to hypnosis.
Well, it did make me curious about it, because when you have a doctor and someone very well reputed telling you that they believe in it, you know, it's the same thing with Dr. Weiss, Brian Weiss. You know, he really, he's the psychologist who's written so many books that people have read, and that just lends credence to it if someone like that is open-minded to it.
So what I want to talk about is, let's clarify for people, you know, there's so many misconceptions about being hypnotized. So maybe you can explain to our audience what happens when you are hypnotized. People think sometimes that they're put into a trance and they don't know what's happening. And so let's have you clarify that.
So it really is just allowing yourself to quiet your mind and be receptive, you know, almost like blanking your mind out like a plain blank movie screen, and then letting that story come to you. And what's fascinating is a lot of people will say, well, gosh, if you had, you know, told me to make up a story about why I have a fear of water, this would not have been what I would have made up. And that's what's convincing to people oftentimes, is what comes to them is not what they would think analytically about, you know, making up in their minds, if that makes sense.
So when something really takes them by surprise,
yes,
then that's a powerful key for their mind to say, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Right.
Like, where did that come from? You know what interests me, too, is that people, and I know I've been through stages of this myself, where people are drawn to certain time periods or certain styles that reflect, for me, powerful past lives. Have you had any experience with people who will be saying, oh, I always have to decorate my house in a Victorian way, or, has that happened for you in any way?
Yes, I think there are a lot of people who feel drawn to certain time periods, feel like they have lived, experienced a certain battle or a war. I had a guy recently who told me he felt like he was at the Battle of Troy and he was killed.
Oh, wow.
But even with that said, what's really fascinating is oftentimes when they do the past life regression, it's not that time period. And it may be because oftentimes how I phrase it for people is I'll give them the suggestion that whatever life comes up for them is the one that's most important for them to know about today, that's most influencing or affecting their life today. And so then it kind of can take a different direction when you give that kind of suggestion.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about past lives, many people have many different beliefs about past lives. I kind of resonate with the idea that we are living all of our lives simultaneously, like the pages of a book, and our soul has the overview of all of our lives. And when we experience one thing in a lifetime, like let's say someone got shot through the leg with an arrow, then it's going to have that bleed-through effect into the present lifetime. So it's going to affect that person's leg, or they're going to experience pain or have a scar or something. And so what is your experience with kind of physical manifestations on people?
And that brings up Ian Stevenson again. He would find that oftentimes the children he was studying, because he felt that if these past lives came from children in remote villages in India, then it couldn't be tainted from watching television or reading a book. But he was fully convinced that if you have a birthmark, that is oftentimes a scar from another lifetime. And I did have a woman who came in to see me, and she was exploring past lives, and she happened to mention that she was having knee troubles. And during one of her regressions, she went back to an earlier life where she was a young boy with polio who had those metal braces on his legs. And once she gained the understanding of what she was supposed to learn about that lifetime, the pain went away, and that was really mind-blowing for me.
That's amazing. And I'm sure with what you have witnessed in your practice that you get as much out of this as the people that you are helping.
Oh, it is extremely rewarding because, yes, back to your idea of someone doing the regression, I am the guide, I'm the facilitator, but the story comes to that person, and oftentimes it's very cathartic, meaning people cry. They literally feel like they're there. And I had a woman, she came with her husband and another couple. She was just sort of along for the ride, and but her husband was very interested in reincarnation. She said, well, I'll try it. And she ended up having this mind-blowing experience where she remembered being on the Arizona when it was bombed during Pearl Harbor, and she was moaning and she was groaning, and it was really fascinating because I asked her what was the point of her being involved in this and being involved in war, and it was camaraderie and bonding and loyalty were the lessons that she was supposed to learn from that life, and that was really cool because she had no expectations, and those are my favorite kind of sessions when people just, you see they walk out and their mind is just stretched.
Yeah. So that's a good thing for people to come in with no expectations, because you don't want to be so focused on, especially if you're aware of past lives, you don't want to be so focused on something that you're going to block everything else out.
Right.
So did they do it together? Did people actually do this together, or did you do each one of them separately?
I did them separately.
Okay.
Yeah. So they each did, although I have done groups before, several times I've done, getting a group together, and it's a little, you'll have some people who really get into it and spontaneously recall, but then some people it's kind of difficult because you can't time it or pace it as well as you can one-on-one.
Right. And in the instance of having a husband and a wife come in separately, did anything come up where they had shared lifetimes?
I have had people, not that particular couple, but I have had a couple who had shared lifetimes, and it was really interesting because he remembered a life where he was an American Indian, and his wife in that life was in a covered wagon going across the prairie. He didn't speak English. He didn't speak Native American. And then when she got regressed, she was she was a young French girl taking a boat to the New World, and he was a British sailor. So what was fascinating, though, is when you step back and look at both stories, it epitomized their issues. They had problems with communication, and in both lives there was this deep respect for each other, but they spoke different languages literally.
Oh my gosh, that's so incredible.
Yeah,
it's so interesting. So I want to talk about you for a minute. So what is the process like for you? Do you feel an intuitive or visual connection? Do you work with guides? How are you guided? How is the session? How does it work for you?
It has evolved over the years. Initially, it was somewhat of reading scripts. I actually trained with Richard Sutphin and Henry Leo Bolduc, who both have published several books on past lives and are hypnotherapists. And it has really evolved for me. One thing that I've found after years of taking people into a state of hypnosis, I have to really get relaxed because you can hear it in my voice as I'm guiding someone if I'm not relaxed. I really try to, if I'm taking someone to a beach, I imagine a beach. If I'm taking them to a garden, I'm going there mentally as well. And I would say, get into a meditative state. And sometimes when I'll hit a sort of roadblock or someone feels stuck, I do. I really feel a connection to my guides and angels, and I ask them, what do I need to do here? And it is, for me, it is very intuitive. And it just seems to flow that way oftentimes.
Well, I can tell you that, and we talked about this, when we spoke, you have some very powerful guides. You have some really powerful guides working with you, and I want to let everyone here know that they are so grateful to you because you didn't have to take this route. You could have been up there doing other work, in a higher vibrational energy. And I hesitate to use the word sacrifice, but it feels almost like let's put it this way, you put the greater good of humanity above your greater good. And they are applauding you for this. So
that touches me so much.
My heart feel so good.
Thank you.
It just makes my heart feel so good.
Well, I really love what I do. I love helping people. And, again, going back to this idea of there's nothing more wonderful than helping someone connect in with their own inner wisdom and gaining that clarity. It's, if anything else, no matter what, if you're doing past life regression or hypnosis, guided imagery, they're all clarity tools. They're tools for you to go inside of yourself and to see things more clearly, to maybe understand where emotions come from and deja vu feelings come from. And that, to me, is really empowering when you can go inside and really know yourself.
And I love the way you said gaining wisdom, because not everything is about healing. there are lots of the wisdom. Lots of times, the wisdom we can attain is just for our own soul growth, and it's not always about healing. So when people come to you specifically for past life reading, what do you find are there many different reasons they come? For fun, for excitement, for wisdom, for healing? Have you experienced lots of different reasons?
I would say in a general sense, if it isn't to overcome some sort of phobia, like a fear of water, fear of heights, something like that, it's usually because they're just having trouble. They feel like they're stuck with some emotion, and they can't pin it on anything, incident from childhood or anything. And so they're looking for clarity. They're looking for some form of insight and wisdom, and that is usually almost always what comes out of it.
So people come in with different agendas. They don't necessarily come in for past life regression. If, as you said, someone comes in with obsessive behavior or an excessive fear, how do they end up going to, how do you lead them into a past life regression? How does that happen?
Well, honestly, I pretty much let the client guide that. If we've done, I have a woman who has been working on weight, and she's been really religious about listening to her recordings and whatnot, and there wasn't really anything, from childhood, and she really feels like she kind of came in with, that's the thing, people will say, well, I feel like I came in with this sadness, or I've always had this problem with food or whatever, and so then I suggest it as a tool, but I would say most of the time people are asking for it. I would say people are really interested in it these days with all of Brian Weiss's books, and they're asking to do it.
Sure. So people, and the reason I bring that up is because if someone is a little bit unsure or hesitant, you're not going to force them into a past life regression. You guide them to where they are comfortable going.
Oh, absolutely. And it would be because we've already had some conversations and they may have expressed an interest. I think I was sharing with you, I had a stockbroker who came to see me years ago, and he said, I have a great life. This was in Newport Beach, California. I make good money. I drive a great car. There's nothing wrong with my life, but, I keep having these feelings of guilt all the time. So we did traditional hypnosis, and it seemed to get him halfway there. And he was really frustrated, and he said, I feel like I came in with this guilt. And I said, well, do you feel like it was there before this lifetime? And he was like, yeah, I've never thought about that before, but I'd be willing to explore that. And it was really amazing. He went back to a story of a life in Germany where he lived in a small village, and he exposed some Jews, a family of Jews that were hiding there, and they were killed. And
wow.
And he carried this guilt his whole life about doing that to this family. And whether that really happened or not, it was so cathartic for him that it released the emotions that he felt were weighing him down. And it was
and because it's not just about people coming in and experiencing something terrible that either they happened to them or they did to someone else. It's the experience of understanding why it happened and then being able to release whatever negative feelings are attached to that.
Right.
This is so much fun. Okay, so tell me about when people are really, in the zone, what kind of physical, you talked about emotional changes, that people will get emotional. Do you see any physical changes?
Well, I told you on the phone, it's just amazing when people go into hypnosis, I see what they looked like when they were 10 to 15 years younger. Because they get
out
so
the
relaxed.
Kodak camera, take a picture.
Yes, they get so relaxed. But it's really interesting. It depends on the person. Some people will, and I think it depends on your personality. If you're a very detail-oriented person, you're the type of person that will recall every detail. I had this one woman, it took an hour to go through the kitchen in this home that she lived in another lifetime. She was smelling the pie baking in the hearth and feeling the warmth from the fire. And then other people get more impressions. Feeling people tend to get more of just an impression of what's going on or a feeling of what happened. But what's really fascinating is people will change their diction. They will use the words and phrases that people would have used back then.
Right. That wouldn't be part of their psyche today.
Right. And, for example, I had a girl who remembered coming over on a boat with her family to the New World, she said, and her husband died of the disease on the way over. And I'm thinking in my mind, the disease, and she said the rats. And I guess, back then that's probably what they would have called it, the disease, because it was the only one. And,
it was because it was the plague. It was the Black Plague. They called it the disease.
Yes, so that's really interesting. And then, of course, it's really fascinating. I actually have, I record the person. I don't record me during the past life regression sessions. I record what the person is recalling or the story that they're seeing or sensing. And then I have many people who actually take the time to go and research that town, the names, and that's when it really gets interesting, when people actually validate the information that comes up for them.
Yeah, I mean, many of us are aware of children who will talk about other lifetimes, having different names, knowing other people. And now, of course, with the way the world is moving, in seeking spirituality and being open, it's much more embraced, whereas before it would be just kind of ignored or shut off. So, gosh, that's so fascinating. So tell us about the oldest time that you took anyone back to, or I should say they took themselves back to.
I actually did a regression on a woman who went back to caveman times. And
amazing.
Yeah, she lived in a cave. It was a lonely life, and no matter what life someone goes to, I always take them to their death, and then we look at what were they supposed to learn in that life. So even in this caveman time, which was very simplistic and kind of lonely and pretty boring, there was a lesson to be learned in that lifetime, for at least for this woman.
And I've heard that if you take people to their death and they experience that, it really helps them to believe, because they feel the feelings. It helps them to believe what they're going through. Do you find that to be true?
I think,
or doesn't it matter?
I think it helps them. It probably helps them with that, but even more so, it helps them to really have this feeling of not fearing death, because they are looking back on a body and they're conscious of that. And that's really fascinating. I mean, I've regressed thousands of people over the years, and and every single time it's always something meaningful that they're supposed to learn and gain, and it's just you get to a point where you don't fear it anymore for that reason.
Sure, and how beautiful it is to be able to see your death and not fear it. That's funny. Someone in our chat room after I asked you that question, I jumped into the chat room and someone's asking about how far back a person's regressed. So we've got the psychic connection going on here.
There are many people who will go to what I call a time between lives, and it usually almost always is a time of reflection on, what they were supposed to learn in the life they just went through. and what lessons they still need to work on, what things they still need to work on going forward. And it's really fascinating because for so many people, when they do it, if they go to the time between lives right before this life, it brings so much healing because they'll understand that some of the things that they've seen as difficulties in their life, they just have a different perspective on it. They see it as their soul chose those things as an opportunity for growth and learning and wisdom and forgiveness and healing.
And, I think that's a really powerful tool also because so many times I get into readings trying to explain to people that as souls, we make the choices for our lifetimes. Yes, we have free will, but we make these choices. We set up these challenges for ourselves. There really are no victims and villains. And understanding that, going into that space in between lives and looking at it and being able to say, oh, I see why I decided to do this, even though it seems like a horrific experience to live through, but you understand why it is. So it's just as important to go back there, too, and I bet you that blows a couple of people's minds.
It does, and so that brings up a good point. I think the reason, I tell people, who knows what the truth is. Some people believe in collective consciousness, like Jung, where, it's one big vat of knowledge up there and we're all tapping into it. But regardless of where this story has come from, if it is a past life that you have lived, or it's just an allegory, a story that is coming to you creatively, either way, people are really moved and given so much information through these stories, and to make them up in the rapid amount of time that people are sort of downloading these stories is just, if you go through it, you'll understand there's no way that you could make this up, and it can be so insightful in so many different levels. I'll give you an example. When I went through in my training and I did a past life regression, I just picked something really benign. It was on the fly that I volunteered to do this, and I said, well, gee, I want to know why all of a sudden I have allergies in my 20s. I never had them growing up, and they showed me a life where I was a Roman, the story I saw coming to me was a life where I was a Roman peasant, and I'm cutting this wheat, and I'm really angry because the ruler was taking all of our wheat, and the villagers were starving, and I was really angry about it. And about several years later, I found out that I was wheat and gluten intolerant.
Oh, boy.
And
wow.
So, my inner mind conveyed a really powerful message to me, and at the time I just wasn't aware enough. I was so new into all of this that I wasn't aware that message was there until later. So that's what I try to do with people when they come in, is because I've done this for so long, is help them to kind of find or see those messages for themselves.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Rebecca, what would you say was one of the most powerful healings that you saw take place? Is there any one in particular that stands out?
I would say...
or is it just many?
Two women, actually, who really impressed me. They came in to look at why they were obsessed with men who weren't their husbands. And
oh, my goodness.
Interestingly, and both of them, so these people, it was kind of they're not related to each other or anything, but they both have the same issue. And both of them went back to past lives that they had lived with these men, and it was really amazing. Once they recalled these lives, they cried, they got the lesson, they understood what they were supposed to learn about this attachment that they still felt. It was cleared, and without even giving them suggestions for that, the wisdom cleared that connection for them. And one of my mentors always says, wisdom erases karma. To me, wisdom elicits that healing where you can move forward, and both of these women did, and I was really impressed.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of like the key. You know, when you hear things like knowledge is power, there's a lot behind that. It's understanding to bring balance, because really it's all about the balance. It's about the balance in our lives. And it's funny how, I mean, you hear stories all the time about people who become obsessed with other people. Sometimes they may not even know them, and they don't know why they're obsessed. So that kind of brings a lot of light to it. So I just want to touch on this a little bit, because there's other parts to your practice. And so say if someone has an addiction problem, they can't stop smoking, they can't stop eating, or, you know, they can come in, and what's the difference between how you would help someone like that as opposed to just doing the regression?
Okay. Well, with any addiction, I really encourage people to be kind to themselves about it, because even though your conscious mind knows that this habit isn't good for you, the subconscious feels like it's getting a benefit and that it's gaining something from this habit, whether it be stress reduction. That's usually it for smoking. It's how people are managing their stress. Even food is oftentimes a way for people to manage their stress or manage their emotions. And so it's a lot of giving them, I encourage them to learn the hypnosis as a tool, and once they pull that into place, it's much easier to let go of that habit when they have something else that gives them meets the same need. And so that's really how I work with addictions to start out with.
And also, this is a really important point here. You do this. You are able to do this over the phone, because when I was speaking to some of my friends and they heard that you do this over the phone, since you're in South Carolina and we're here in New Jersey, they were pretty excited about that. Could you explain how that would work?
Sure. Basically, once you close your eyes, you can be anywhere. But what I'll usually have the person do is they just need to have a hands-free phone and a private place where the phone's not going to ring and the dog's not going to bark. And we'll make sure that you have some music to play in the background in your room, or I can put on my speakerphone. And then I take them through the hypnosis, and I'm recording. If I need to record the session for some post-hypnotic suggestions, I record it, and then I can mail you a CD or send it as an MP3 download. And I have a lot of, I just did hi, Carol in Hilton Head. She said she was listening tonight, so we just did a distance session on Tuesday. And, once you close your eyes, you can pretty much be anywhere.
Yeah, and that's something that I come upon, too. People say to me, how can you do a reading over the phone? And I say to them that as long as I can connect with your energy, you could be on the moon. As long as we have some kind of satellite connection there, you know, it's just being able to connect to their energy. And I suspect for you that from your part of it, since you have such an incredible intuitive ability, that you have such a gift here, and I'm really calling it a gift because it really is a gift, that you have taken and expanded upon. I mean, from you, what I get from your energy is you have someone who could play the piano, and now you're Beethoven. So being able to just make that connection, and you intuitively are guided where to go with them, this is a wonderful thing. So once again, your website is?
It's www.charlestonhypnosiscenter.com.
Right, and everybody could get all the information there. Okay, so I am going to start taking some calls. So my first caller, if I can get my switchboard to, there we go. Okay, 732-504, you are on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Who am I speaking to, please?
It's Nancy.
Okay, Nancy, what's your question?
Well, my question is, I've never been hypnotized before, and I seem to be having some issues with abandonment, and I'm wondering how long would it take for me to actually get to the root of something like that? Is it one session, couple sessions?
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
That's a great question, because when someone comes in for a problem like that, I like to look at it and see where it was triggered. This is basically sometimes someone can have an issue that they bring in, a feeling that they come in with this life, but then something will happen in this life to trigger that same feeling. Mm-hmm. It could be, your first love abandon you or something. Mm-hmm. So how I usually work is I don't usually do regression on the first session because I really want you to feel comfortable with the process. Mm-hmm. So the first session is teaching you the hypnosis, getting you used to what to expect. Mm-hmm. And then on the second session, really what we do is we take the feeling and we follow that feeling back in time. Mm-hmm. And for many people, it involves clearing some things in this life, and then if that person feels the want, the need, the instinct, we'll keep on going, and we'll go back into past lives. And I had a woman who had a fear of water, and that's what happened for her. She had some scary events when she was a child, and then we cleared the emotion. Even though logically, analytically, you've moved past an event, I believe on the emotional level, oftentimes there is no such thing as time, and that trauma or upset will just keep playing until it's healed.
Right.
So I like to look at your life and going back in time as one big spectrum, and we're just going to follow it all the way back and clear it as we go.
And how long would a first session normally, what do you recommend for a first session, time-wise?
I usually would do the first session and see what would come up for you in this life, and that would be my normal hour-and-a-half session.
Hour-and-a-half, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing.
Okay, well, thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
And I hope you can follow through with that. I think it would really help you. So in our chat, we have someone asking the Danimator, is it advisable, even possible, to regress yourself? What are your feelings about that, Rebecca?
Yeah, I kind of look at it as, there's some people who can walk out there on the golf course and who can swing a golf club without any instruction, and then there's others of us who need lots of guidance and coaching, and I think it's kind of that way with this process. Some people will have just naturally spontaneous recall. Others, it is really helpful to have someone guide you through it so your analytical mind can, really take a step to the back burner.
Yeah, so it's a very personal thing. And once again, what I always tell everyone is to learn to meditate, because when you meditate, you open up so many channels. Okay, I'm going to take another caller. And we have area code 941-735. You're on the air.
Hello, darling. It's Donna Rose from Florida.
Donna Rose. How are you, Donna Rose?
I am fine, and hello to your wonderful guest.
Hello.
So what's your question? And Donna Rose, you're calling from Florida, right?
Yes.
Okay. What's your question?
So, I have a question. Before the tsunamis that we know of recently took place, I used to have dreams of dying in a tsunami a lot of times, and I actually used to see it. So I had Akashic Records sessions, 3 of them, and they were able to reveal specific detail of exactly how I died in the tsunami. So the good thing is that I stopped having the dreams after that. However, even though I still ride the waves and I enjoy being in the ocean, I still have these in the back of my mind, these apprehensive thoughts about it. Now, how much more beneficial would a past life regression session be in overcoming the emotional component, in your opinion?
Well, that's just, and I just want to say this before you even start, Rebecca. That's one thing we talked about before, was you experiencing it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Rebecca. I'm sorry.
Yes, and also, too, I would start to think, okay, if there's some reason that you're still having apprehension and your mind is still going to that, to me that's an indicator there's still some knowledge to be gained there. And so I would go with it by following the feeling and either letting it lead you to the source of it, whether that is the past life or it's something else you're supposed to know about. And that's how I would look at it, is if it keeps coming up for you, don't dismiss it. It's usually your intuition wanting to convey some information to you.
So do you think a session would actually take it further in resolving the apprehension, perhaps?
It could. If it definitely could. It could resolve the apprehension by way of letting you know whatever it is you're still supposed to learn. To me, you wouldn't have the apprehension unless there's something you're still supposed to learn from that experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I was just trying to figure out the difference of the Akashic Record session versus a past life regression. And it seems like there's more emotional resolution.
Donna Rose, the difference there, Donna Rose, is someone accessing the Akashic Records or the psychic information is doing it for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you go through this process, you're going to be doing it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, my dears. Take care.
You're welcome. Thank you for calling in. Okay. That was interesting. This is so much fun, isn't it? I love being me sometimes. We are almost out of time, so Rebecca, I want to say thank you so much for being on the show this evening. Please go to charlestonhypnosiscenter.com, and it's been wonderful, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to end my show with a quote, like I always do. And this is from an unknown author. What you need to know about the past is that no matter what has happened, it has all worked together to bring you to this very moment. And this is the moment you can choose to make everything new right now. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Good night, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you.